They believed ultimatums were strength. Admiral Eva Rostova watched the light of a dying star paint the bridge of the Vindicator in shades of rust and regret. Before her, the main holographic display showed the Eridani threshold, a strategic nexus now held hostage. 70,000 civilian lives bundled into the fragile hulls of the convoy ship Stellaron were the currency of this negotiation. Her Fleet Task Force 11 was the only thing standing between that convoy and a doctrine of absolute, unquestioning obedience. The voice of the Valberan ascendancy, a synthesized baritone dripping with contempt, echoed from the comms panel. Your presence challenges the unchallenged word. Your defiance will be met with consequence. A countdown timer appeared superimposed over the convoy's icon. It read 27 standard hours. The stakes were clear, brutal, and shrinking with every passing second. Lyceum, the fleet's mind, spoke in her thoughts, a current of pure data beneath the surface of her own consciousness. Admiral, their posture is textbook. A layered defensive sphere around the Stellaron with their heaviest cruisers at the geometric center. They are inviting a direct assault they know we cannot win. Rostova's fingers tightened on the cool metal of the command rail. The vibration of the ship's gravitic anchors was a faint, reassuring hum beneath her feet. They aren't just inviting it, Lyceum, she murmured, her eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. They're broadcasting it. Their doctrine was a cage disguised as a sword. On a secondary screen, intercepted Valberan transmissions scrolled past. They weren't encrypted military channels, but public broadcasts intended for their own populace. The feed showed glorious replays of past consequences, entire fleets atomized for failing to comply. It was a pageant of power, a celebration of coercion. It was the foundation of their ascendancy. Commander Kaito, report, Rostova said, her voice cutting through the low thrum of the bridge. Her executive officer stepped forward, his face grim. No change, Admiral. They hold the Stellaron in a tractor lock. Any attempt to move the convoy registers as a hostile act. Life support is stable for now. The ultimatum stands: CD the threshold and acknowledge their sovereignty, or the convoy pays the price. They wrote demands in fire. A young ensign at the communications station looked back, her expression taut with anxiety. Ma'am, they're hailing the convoy directly, repeating the terms, telling them their fate is in our hands. This was the core of their strategy. It wasn't just about military victory. It was about psychological fracture, turning the protected against their protectors. It was cruel, efficient, and utterly predictable. Rostova met Kaito's gaze. They expect us to break ourselves against their shield. A grand, futile gesture of honor. Kaito nodded. A final tragic charge. It plays well on their public broadcasts. Then we will give them a different story to tell. Rostova declared, a quiet fire hardening her voice. Lyceum. I want every sensor we have focused on their formation. Find me the seams. Find me the flaw in their perfect, unchallengeable word. We would answer with arithmetic. Inside the Stellaron, a teacher named Alani was trying to distract the children in her assigned sector. The ship's internal lights were dimmed to conserve power, casting long shadows across the makeshift classroom in the cargo bay. She used a small handheld projector to cast images of Earth's long-extinct animals onto a bulkhead. A blue whale floated serenely above their heads. And this one, she said, her voice gentle despite the tremor in her hands, was the largest creature to ever live on our home world. It sang songs that could travel across entire oceans. A small boy no older than 7 raised his hand. Did it sing because it was scared? Alani's smile was a fragile thing. No, sweetie. It sang so it wouldn't be alone. Their power was a monologue. Ours would be a conversation. Lyceum's response flowed into Rostova's mind, a cascade of impossibly complex data smoothed into understandable concepts. Admiral A flaw is not present in their formation. It is their doctrine itself. The unchallenged word requires a binary outcome, absolute compliance or total annihilation. There is no protocol for ambiguity. The AI's logic was as cold and clean as deep space. Rostova saw the pathway forward, a narrow, treacherous channel through a storm. Ambiguity, then. Commander Kato, prepare the decoy wings. Full-spectrum emission profiles. I want them to look sound and smell like our forward destroyer squadron. Kaito's eyebrows rose. A feint, Admiral. They'll see through it in minutes. We don't need minutes. We need seconds, she countered. We need them to hesitate, to question what they're seeing just long enough for us to change the geometry of the problem. The console beside her shimmered, reflecting the strain in her own eyes. A new thought from Lyceum, colder still. The optimal strategy remains a sacrificial gambit with the frigate Lancer. A high-velocity run to draw their fire, creating a 5-second window for the main fleet. Projected crew survival, 4%. That is not a strategy, Lyceum Rostova said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. That is a eulogy. Find another way. The ledger of our souls would not be balanced with the blood of our own. The AI paused the flow of data, momentarily halting. It was the machine equivalent of a thoughtful silence. Acknowledged. Recalculating based on the parameter of 0 acceptable crew loss. This significantly narrows our tactical options. The scent of recycled ozone seemed to tickle the back of Rostova's throat, a constant reminder of the closed system keeping them all alive. Rostova's gaze swept across the bridge crew. Their faces were tense but focused, their trust in her, an almost physical weight on her shoulders. She would not fail it. The Valbarans see their doctrine as unbreakable. We will not break it. We will reflect it. Kaito's eyes lit with understanding. The mirror lattice. Exactly. Rostova confirmed. Lyceum model a deployment corridor for the lattice drones. I want a wall of pure targeted misinformation. When they look at us, they will see only themselves. Their certainty was about to become their blindfold. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. The mirror lattice was not a weapon system. It was a network of thousands of small, hyper-reflective drones designed for sensor jamming and energy redirection. Against a prepared enemy, they were tissue paper. But the Valbarans weren't prepared for this. They were prepared for a charge. Their doctrine demands a clear target to punish Rostova, explained her voice low and steady for the entire bridge to hear. If we deny them a clear target, their entire decision tree collapses. They will be paralyzed by their own rigid commands. They'll adapt, warned Tactical Officer Ben Carter, his knuckles white on his console. Yes, Rostova agreed. But adaptation takes time. Time is what we are buying for the Stellaron. Comms open a fleet-wide channel. I'll address the task force. You do not defeat a dogma by destroying its followers. Her voice resonated through every ship in Task Force 11, from the engine rooms to the mess halls. This is the Admiral. We are facing an enemy that believes its will is absolute. They have mistaken rigidity for strength and cruelty for power. They seek to make us participants in their brutal theater. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. The hum of the Vindicator's life support was the only sound. We will not play our part. Our objective is not to destroy them, but to save our own. We will be ghosts in their machine. We will show them that the human spirit does not break. It bends, it adapts, and it protects its own. Rostova out. A quiet ripple of resolve passed through the bridge. The tension did not disappear, but it changed, hardening from fear into focus. You teach it that its foundations are sand. Lyceum's voice returned a calm whisper in her mind. Admiral, the Valbarans have made a demonstration. They have fired a low-power disruptor at the Stellaron. Life support in Cargo Sector Gamma is now offline. The countdown timer on the main screen jumped, losing 3 hours in a single sickening tick. Rostova's jaw clenched. The bastards. It was a move of pure, calculated sadism. Did they broadcast that she asked, her voice dangerously quiet? Yes, Admiral Kaito confirmed, his face pale, with a chyron that reads, the price of hesitation. Rostova looked at the timer. 24 hours remained. They just made this personal, she said. Launch the decoys. Launch the lattice. Now. Their arrogance wrote the first page. Our actions would write the last. The Vindicator shuddered as the decoy drones were expelled from their launch tubes, accelerating instantly to flank speed. They were little more than engines strapped to powerful transmitters, screaming into the void, with the energy signatures of a full destroyer squadron. They raced towards the Valbaran fleet's right flank, a deliberate, obvious, and almost insulting feint. On the main screen, the Valbaran ships held their perfect formation. Their discipline was impressive. Not a single vessel moved to intercept. They recognized the tactic for what it was, a hollow gesture. Or so they thought. They are ignoring the decoys as predicted, Lyceum noted. Their attention remains locked on our main body and the convoy. Good, Rostova said, her gaze unwavering. Now they're watching the wrong hand. Deploy the mirrors. Phase 1. We would hold a mirror to their face and let them defeat themselves. From the underbellies of the human cruisers, thousands of tiny drones deployed in silence. They did not burn hot or scream with energy. They were ghosts coasting on inertia, fanning out in a precise, pre-calculated arc between Task Force 11 and the Valbaran line. To the enemy's passive sensors, they were nothing more than a faint dusting of micrometeoroids. Lattice is deploying, Admiral Kaito reported, his eyes glued to the tactical plot. Time to activation, 90 seconds. The ship felt unnaturally still, the calm before the storm. Rostova could feel her own heartbeat, a steady drum against the silence. The decoys are entering their optimal broadcast range, Carter added. Now, Admiral, now, she commanded. Light them up. A new command protocol surged through the decoy swarm. Their simple signatures blossomed into a complex, chaotic storm of electronic warfare. They weren't just mimicking ships anymore. They were screaming with false targeting locks, phantom weapon discharges, and simulated shield failures. It was a digital cacophony designed to overwhelm. They could not punish what they could not define. The Valbaran fleet reacted instantly. Several of their picket ships broke formation, their energy signatures flaring as they turned to engage the sudden overwhelming threat on their flank. It was a minor shift, a subtle crack in their perfect wall, but it was exactly what Rostova needed. They took the bait, Kaito breathed a hint of disbelief in his voice. Their doctrine demanded it, Rostova corrected. A direct challenge, even a simulated one, must be met. Activate the mirrors. Phase 2. The lattice drones came to life. Each tiny unit pivoted its reflective surface, catching the Valbaran's own sensor pings. The data pouring back into the Valbaran command ships would be a nightmare. A single human cruiser now looked like 5. A frigate appeared to be in 3 places at once. Their own targeting beams were being scattered, reflected, and returned to them as ghosts. Their greatest weapon was their own inflexibility. In a quiet corner of the Stellaron, the little boy who had asked about the whale was now watching the dark viewport. The distant, silent flashes of the engagement began to play across the glass. His mother pulled him close, shielding his eyes. "Don't look, honey. It's just starlight." But he had already seen it. He had seen the tiny, distant shapes of Task Force 11 placing themselves between his home and the enemy. "They're fighting for us," he whispered, his voice full of a child's simple, profound awe. His mother held him tighter, a silent prayer on her lips. A moment of mercy is worth a lifetime of munitions. The Valbaran bridge must be chaos. Rostova could picture it, alarms blaring. Tactical displays, corrupted commanders demanding clear targets from systems that could no longer provide them. Their rigid command structure was grinding against a problem it was never designed to solve. It was a system built to issue threats, not to untangle knots. "Admiral, it's working," Carter exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. "Their firing solutions are degrading by the second. They're firing, but it's wild. They're shooting at ghosts." Streaks of crimson energy lanced through the void, missing the human ships by kilometers. The Valbarans were firing at their own reflected signals, wasting energy and sowing confusion within their own ranks. The perfect sphere of control was becoming a circular firing squad. The convoy, Kaito. "What's their status? The tractor lock is wavering, Admiral. The ships providing the lock are the same ones being hammered by sensor ghosts. Their power is fluctuating." Lyceum Rostova said, her voice sharp with intent. "I need a window. The moment that lock fails, even for a microsecond." Their chain of command was a chain, and we were about to pull it. "The probability of a total lock failure is low," the AI responded coolly. "However, a brownout event is likely within the next 40 seconds. A reduction in beam cohesion of 70% or more. It will be our only chance." Rostova's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, watching the beautiful, deadly dance unfold. The decoy drones were dying now, picked off one by one, but they had served their purpose. The mirror lattice was holding a shimmering wall of lies that the Valbarans could not see past. The deck plates beneath her feet vibrated as the Vindicator adjusted its position, a predator preparing to strike. "Helm be ready," she ordered. "Comm signal the Stellaron. Tell them to be prepared for an immediate burn the instant they are free." No hesitation. The ensign nodded, her fingers flying across her console. "Signal sent and acknowledged, ma'am." 30 seconds, Lyceum whispered in her mind. "The universe does not reward dogma. It rewards adaptation." The Valbaran commander, Lord Arbiter Tier, stared at his tactical display in disbelief. It was a mess of corrupted data and nonsensical returns. One moment the human fleet was in front of him, the next it was seemingly everywhere and nowhere at once. His picket commanders were screaming for orders, their ships firing on sensor ghosts. This was not how the unchallenged word operated. "Silence," he roared, his voice cracking with fury. "Target their flagship, concentrate all fire on the largest signature." But there were a dozen largest signatures. The mirrors were not just hiding the fleet. They were magnifying it, turning a handful of ships into an phantom armada. His perfect doctrine, the source of his power and the terror of his enemies, was failing him. For the first time, he felt a sliver of doubt. The tally of their victories was about to be revised. "Brownout event detected." Lyceum's voice was sharp, clinical. "The tractor beam is at 21% integrity. The window is now, Admiral. It will last for 8 seconds. Execute Rostova's command," was a thunderclap on the bridge. "All ships, forward batteries. Fire a saturation volley. Not at their ships, at the space between them. Give them something else to look at." The human fleet, which had been holding its fire, erupted. Beams of brilliant blue-white energy lashed out, not as killing blows, but as a blinding flash of light, a final stunning distraction. Simultaneously, a targeted pulse from the Vindicator struck the weakened tractor beam emitter, a surgical strike designed not to destroy, but to disrupt. The invisible chain holding the Stellaron shattered. "The convoy is free!" Kaito yelled, his voice thick with triumph. "They're burning! They're away! Brace for the cost of the teaching!" On the main screen, the massive convoy ship began to move its engines, flaring to life with desperate power. It was a slow, lumbering beast, but it was finally free, accelerating towards the safety of the jump gate on the far side of the system. The Valbaran fleet was in disarray, their attention split between the sensor chaos, the blinding light of the human volley, and the escaping prize. But victory is never clean. A single Valbaran cruiser firing on reflex managed to lock onto a true signature through a momentary gap in the mirror lattice. A lance of red energy crossed the void, aimed not at the Vindicator, but at the frigate Intrepid, which was providing close cover for the escaping convoy. Incoming Carter shouted, "Intrepid is targeted!" The frigate's shields flared, absorbing most of the blow, but the impact was still devastating. The ship shuddered violently, its port engines sputtering and dying. Alarms blared across the fleet-wide comm. A cost had been incurred. "Damage report!" Rostova snapped, her brief moment of relief evaporating. "Intrepid reports, shield failure on the port side." Kaito relayed, his voice tight. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 5. Life support is holding. 22 wounded, no fatalities. They are venting plasma, but she's alive." The ledger always demands an entry. The escape of the convoy had been secured, but now Task Force 11 had to deal with the consequences. The mirror lattice was starting to howl, the small drones running out of power or being picked off by stray shots. The sensor ghosts were thinning. Soon the Valbarans would see the true diminished size of the human fleet, and they would be furious. Lyceum's voice cut through the aftermath. "Admiral, a new broadcast from the Valbaran flagship. It is Lord Arbiter Tyr." On screen, Rostova ordered. The face that appeared on the main view screen was aquiline and severe, his features contorted in a mask of cold rage. His eyes burned with the fire of a zealot whose faith had just been shaken. He did not speak to Rostova. He spoke to the universe. "The challenge of the human fleet has been acknowledged," the Lord Arbiter declared, his voice a low growl of thunder. "Their deception has invalidated the terms of the previous ultimatum. The convoy is no longer the target, by the law of the unchallenged word. Task Force 11 has forfeited its right to exist. We will render judgment." Their ultimatum had failed, so they issued a new one: annihilation. The Valbaran fleet began to move. The undisciplined firing ceased. The confusion vanished, replaced by a cold, unified purpose. They were no longer trying to enforce a blockade. They were maneuvering into an execution formation. The ships began to form a crescent, a tightening net designed to envelop and crush the human fleet. "They're boxing us in," Kaito observed, stating the obvious. The tactical display was turning a sickening shade of red. "The jump gate is behind them. The convoy got out, but they've left us no exit." Rostova watched the enemy's precise, practiced movements. They had been fooled once, but they were not fools. They had recovered with terrifying speed. They've abandoned the pretense of the ultimatum. This is just extermination now. It was then that Lyceum delivered the truly bad news. "Admiral, I am detecting a significant gravitic distortion. It is emanating from emitters on their larger cruisers. They are generating a containment field. The open corridor they left for the convoy. It was not an oversight. It was bait. It was not a corridor. It was the jaws of a trap." The space around Task Force 11 began to shimmer. The distant stars seemed to warp and twist. A low, pervasive hum resonated through the Vindicator's hull, a sound that felt fundamentally wrong. The human fleet, which had been so nimble and elusive just moments before, was now caught fast. "Helm report," Rostova demanded. The helmsman's hands were clenched on his controls. "No response, Admiral. We're fighting against a current. It's like moving through molasses. Maximum thrust is barely holding our position." The Valbarans had let the convoy go. They had been the secondary objective all along. Their real prize was the fleet that had dared to defy them, the fleet that had made them look weak. They wanted to make an example of Task Force 11, and they had just sprung the trap to do it. On the bridge of the fleeing Stellaron, the teacher Alani watched the tactical display on a public comm panel. She saw the red net close around the ships that had saved them. The children in her care were safe, but their saviors were now caged. Her heart ached with a terrible, helpless gratitude. They had saved the innocent only to become the condemned. Lyceum's voice was devoid of any emotion, but the implications of its words were terrifying. The field is stabilizing. Escape is no longer possible. Their fleet is achieving optimal firing positions. They will be able to deliver overwhelming force to any single point in our formation. Our estimated time to total fleet destruction is 12 minutes. Rostova stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. She looked at the implacable enemy closing in at the distorted space that held them prisoner. She had won the first round. She had saved 70,000 lives, but the price was steep. "They believe they have cornered us," she said, her voice a calm island in a sea of rising panic. "They think the lesson is over." She turned to face her crew, a faint, dangerous smile touching her lips. Kaito saw it, and his own fear subsided, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. He knew that look. The Admiral was not defeated. She was angry. Lyceum Rostova said, her voice ringing with newfound clarity. "The Valbarans broadcast their every victory. Are they broadcasting this?" A pause. "Yes, Admiral. On all Ascendancy public channels. They are titling the broadcast, 'The Final Reckoning of the Unbelievers.'" Rostova's smile widened. Good. This was not an execution. It was a classroom, and the bell was about to ring. "They have shown us their doctrine," Rostova announced, her voice resonating with cold purpose. "They have shown us their ledger of supposed victories, all built on bullying the weak and threatening the defenseless. They have broadcast their cruelty for all to see." She took a step towards the main holographic display, her silhouette framed against the tightening ring of enemy warships. The Valbaran fleet was a wall of steel and fire, absolute and imposing. But Rostova saw something else. She saw an opportunity. "They've built their entire society on a lie," she continued. "The lie of the unchallenged word. The idea that their will is law, that their power is absolute, and that their judgment is final. They think this trap is the ultimate proof of that lie." Lyceum's data stream flowed into her consciousness, a torrent of probabilities and tactical models, all of them ending in destruction. "Admiral, all projections remain negative. Our heat sinks are approaching capacity from the strain of fighting the gravitic field. Our energy reserves are dwindling. The mathematical conclusion is unavoidable. Mathematics doesn't account for morality." Lyceum Rostova countered softly. "It doesn't measure the brittleness of a tyrant's pride. A debt has come due. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars." The thought was a core tenet of her command, a line drawn in the stars that they would not cross. The Valbarans dealt in subjugation. Task Force 11 dealt in consequences. It was time to deliver them. "Kaito," she said, her eyes alight. Remember our talks about asymmetric response, about turning an enemy's strength into their most glaring vulnerability. Kato's expression shifted from grim acceptance to dawning realization. The public broadcast, he whispered. You're not going to fight the fleet. Not yet, Rostova confirmed. We are going to fight their audience. Lyceum, you said their doctrine has no protocol for ambiguity. Let's introduce them to a new concept, accountability. They broadcast their power. We would reflect their shame. The plan formed in her mind, elegant and lethal. It was not a plan of destruction, but of deconstruction. She would not break their ships, she would break the foundational belief that gave them power. She would use their own stage to expose the lie of the unchallenged word to their own people. Lyceum, you have been recording everything correct, their threats, their demonstration against the convoy's life support. Their final ultimatum, correct, Admiral. All data is stored and indexed. I want you to package it. Rostova commanded, her voice crackling with energy. Create a data packet short, clear, and undeniable. Edit their threats against the voice logs of the civilians on the Stellaron. Show the demand, and then show the face of the child they were threatening. A sickness of the soul cannot be cured by cannons. Furthermore, Rostova continued pacing the command deck, her energy filling the space, analyze the mirror lattice data. I want a frame-by-frame breakdown of how their own ships fired on their own sensor ghosts. Highlight every wasted shot. Calculate the energy expenditure and display it as a percentage of their fleet's total power. Carter, the tactical officer, looked up from his station. Admiral, what are you asking? I am asking Lyceum to draft a receipt. Rostova said, a hard edge to her voice. A full accounting of the cost of their victory here today. The cost in moral standing, the cost in wasted resources, the cost in the trust of their own people. It must be exposed to the light. And the delivery system, Kaito asked, already anticipating the answer. Their own broadcast network, Rostova declared. Lyceum, can you hijack their public feed? Just for a few seconds, long enough to replace their final reckoning with our final accounting. The AI was silent for a full 3 seconds. The calculations it was performing must have been staggering. The Valbaran public network is protected by layers of military-grade encryption. A direct breach is impossible. The hope on the bridge deflated like a punctured lung. However, Lyceum continued, they are actively broadcasting from their flagship. Their transmitter is a point of vulnerability. It is not designed to defend against a data surge from a target. It is actively recording. I can use their own broadcast beam as a carrier wave to inject our data packet. The probability of success is 68%. Hold the line, for the dawn is coming. 68%. It was more than a chance. It was a promise. Do it, Rostova ordered without hesitation. Time the injection. For the moment. The Lord Arbiter begins his victory speech. Use his own voice as the trigger. The crew of the Vindicator moved with a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just a target in a cage. They were a bomb waiting to go off. They had a mission that went beyond survival. They were fighting for an idea. What about us? Admiral Carter asked quietly. This won't stop their fleet from firing. Rostova looked him in the eye. No, it won't. But it ensures that when they do, their own people will be watching and asking why. They will see us not as unbelievers, but as the fleet that saved 70,000 innocents while their own leadership was firing at shadows. Their throne is built on lies. We will show them the cracks in the foundation. It will be the most expensive volley they have ever fired, she finished, and the cost will be their legitimacy. Now brace for impact. They're almost in position. The Valbaran crescent tightened. Their weapon ports glowed with imminent fire. The energy of hundreds of converging beams began to fill the space between the fleets, a shimmering promise of oblivion. On the main screen, Lord Arbiter Tyr's face appeared again, magnified and triumphant. He was about to deliver his sermon. People of the Ascendancy, his voice boomed across the system and across his own empire. Today, you bear witness to the strength of the unchallenged word. You see here the consequence of defiance. These humans believed they could mock our power. They were wrong. Let this be a lesson. Lyceum's whisper was a ghost in Rostova's mind. Injection initiated. The truth is the only weapon that grows stronger when you give it away. Lord Arbiter Tyr's voice faltered, a flicker of confusion, crossing his severe features. The broadcast feed displaying his own triumphant image suddenly dissolved into a blizzard of static. For a single priceless second, there was only noise. Then the screen cleared. It was not his face that now looked out upon his empire, but the terrified, tear-streaked face of a human child aboard the Stellaron. His own voice echoed from the speakers, cold and imperious. "Your defiance will be met with consequence." Then the feed cut to a new image, a Valberan cruiser firing a disruptor bolt, followed instantly by a schematic of the convoy ship, showing a life support sector blinking red. An audio clip played the calm, professional voice of a Stellaron crew member. "Sector Gamma is gone. We've lost pressure. Casualties unknown." A shot heard across an empire. On the bridge of the Vindicator, no one breathed. They watched as Lyceum's masterpiece unfolded on the Valberan's own stage. The feed shifted again, showing the chaotic tactical plot from the Valberan perspective, corrupted by the mirror lattice. Red circles highlighted Valberan ships firing on empty space, their energy beams lancing into nothing. A stark white text overlay appeared, the numbers ticking up with sickening speed, energy expenditure on phantom targets. 1,000 terajoules. The final image was of the frigate Intrepid, its port side a mangled wreck from the one lucky shot the Valberans had landed. Then back to the face of the child, now looking not with fear, but with a silent, questioning gaze. Tyr's voice played one last time, a clip from his current speech. "Let this be a lesson." The feed cut to black. The injection was over. It had lasted 7 seconds. Their story had been interrupted by the truth. Aboard the Valberan flagship, the Lord Arbiter stared at his now dark screen, his face a mask of incandescent fury. The quiet murmuring of his bridge crew rose to an audible buzz. They had all seen it. His comms panel lit up with priority alerts from his own high command, from sector governors, from his own subordinates. What was that? His second-in-command stammered, his professional composure shattered. Tyr's head snapped around, his eyes blazing. "Fire!" he snarled, his voice a low, guttural command. "Fire everything." They could not silence the message, so they would try to silence the messenger. The Valberan fleet obeyed. A wave of pure, destructive energy, the focused wrath of a wounded dogma, erupted from the crescent of warships. The space within the gravitic trap ignited, turning from black to blinding white. Rostova's crew braced for the impact, their faces illuminated by the glare of their own imminent destruction. The sound was not an explosion, but a deep, soul-shaking groan as the Vindicator's shields flared to maximum intensity. The ship screamed. Lights flickered and died, backup systems kicking in with a jarring thud. The deck lurched violently, throwing Carter against his console. A shower of sparks rained down from a ruptured conduit overhead. The air filled with the acrid smell of burnt wiring and vaporized shield emitters. "Shields down to 12%, Kaito shouted, pulling himself back to his station. "Multiple hull breaches on the ventral spine. We've lost the aft sensor array." Reckoning had arrived, and it demanded payment. Damage reports flooded the comms channel. The Intrepid, already wounded, had taken another direct hit. Her engines were gone, her life support failing. She was dead in the water, a floating memorial to the cost of this fight. The cruiser Steadfast reported critical power fluctuations, its main reactor struggling to stay online. Every ship in the small fleet had been wounded, but they were still alive. They held Rostova, whispered, her knuckles white where she gripped the command rail. The ship's internal gravity fluctuated, a nauseating ebb and flow. They held the line. The Valbaran volley subsided, their initial furious salvo expended. They were reloading, readjusting their positions for the final killing blow. But something was wrong. The second volley was not as immediate, not as perfectly coordinated as the first. There was a hesitation, a flicker of indecision in their perfect unified formation. A question is a lever that can move an empire. Lyceum's voice, calm as ever, cut through the chaos on the bridge. Admiral, I am intercepting widespread communications on the Valbaran public networks. The data packet has been received and is being disseminated exponentially. Its veracity is being debated, but the images are compelling. The AI projected a sample of the chatter onto a secondary screen. It was a torrent of questions. Is that real? Did we target civilians who was in command of that fleet? They looked like fools shooting at nothing. The energy cost. Our tithes are for defense, not for wasting on ghosts. Why was the unbeliever fleet protecting that convoy in the first place? Their power was never in their ships. It was in unquestioning obelief, and it was fracturing. Lord Arbiter Tyr saw the hesitation. He saw the slight delay in his commander's response times. His orders were being questioned, not openly defied, but implemented with a fatal split second of doubt. The poison of Rostova's truth was already at work, corroding the chains of his command from the inside out. His rage turned to ice. He would crush this fleet, and then he would purge the doubt from his own people. Target their flagship, he commanded, his voice broadcast across his fleet's command channel. Ignore the others. A decapitation strike. Show our people that the head of the serpent has been severed. The Valbaran ships began to pivot, their main weapons converging on the wounded Vindicator. The trap was still in place. The executioner was simply narrowing his aim. Admiral Lyceum stated, its tone unchanged. The probability of survival has dropped to 0. They are concentrating all their firepower. Our remaining shields will not withstand another volley. A cage of gravity, a promise of death. Rostova's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, not on the enemy ships, but on the shimmering field that held them captive. Lyceum, the gravitic emitters. You said they were creating a containment field. How are they synchronized? They are networked, Admiral. Each emitter projects a localized field, but they are linked to create a seamless containment bubble. It requires immense power and precise harmonic balancing to maintain. The AI's response was immediate, the data already analyzed. A harmony. Rostova mused, a new path forward slicing through the despair. And what happens to a harmony if you strike a single discordant note? Kaito's head snapped up. A feedback loop. Precisely. Rostova confirmed. Lyceum modeled the effects of a targeted energy pulse on a single emitter. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to disrupt its harmonic frequency. A precise surgical strike. The key to breaking a chain is to find the weakest link. The AI processed the request. The seconds stretched into an eternity as the Valbaran cannons charged for their final shot. Modeling complete, Lyceum announced. A pulse of the correct frequency and amplitude will trigger a cascading resonance failure. The entire containment field would collapse. The energy backlash would be significant. It would overload the emitters and the ships powering them. The trap would not just break, it would turn on its creators. The risk, Lyceum Rostova demanded. If the pulse is imprecise, it could catastrophically detonate the emitter, potentially creating a localized black hole. Furthermore, the closest emitter is heavily defended by their command cruiser, the Word of Tyre. A strike is tactically impossible. Impossible is not a fact. It is an opinion. Rostova's gaze fell upon the last few operational mirror lattice drones. There were less than 100 left, but they were enough. We will make it possible. We will give them one last ghost to chase. She laid out the plan, her voice sharp and clear, each word a piece of a new, desperate machine. The remaining mirror drones would concentrate on the far side of the formation, creating a single, massive, irresistible phantom signature, the ghost of a human super-dreadnought, a monster of myth. It would be a final, blatant lie, a target so threatening their doctrine could not ignore it. While they turned to face the phantom, a single ship would make a run at the true target. "Who do we have left that's fast enough?" Cato asked, his voice grim. A new voice spoke up on the comms. It was the captain of the corvette Swiftwing. "Admiral, our engines are undamaged. Our shield emitters are fried, but we can still move. Give us the targeting data. We can make that run." It was a suicide mission. An unshielded corvette against a command cruiser. A single spark can start a wildfire. Rostova hesitated for only a heartbeat. She saw the faces of her crew, their expressions a mixture of fear and unwavering resolve. This was the cost. It was always the cost. "Captain, you have your orders. Godspeed." She turned to the rest of the bridge. "Activate the final mirror array. Give them the biggest ghost they have ever seen. Let's make this a memorable show." On a Valburan agricultural world hundreds of light years away, a family gathered around their public broadcast screen. The official feed had returned, showing the glorious Valburan fleet preparing to deliver the final blow. But the father's hand hovered over his terminal, a pirated stream of the human's data packet playing on a secondary window. His daughter, a girl of 10, pointed to the screen. "Father," she asked, her voice small, "why are their ships broken?" The news said they were unbelievers, but it looks like they were protecting someone. The father had no answer. He could only watch his certainty, the bedrock of his entire world, beginning to crumble. Their truth was a hammer, but a question is a seed. "The Phantom is live," Admiral Carter reported, his voice tight. A massive Vindicator-class signature 3 times the size of the original bloomed on the far side of the trap. It was an impossible, ridiculous bluff. But the Valburan doctrine was rigid. Lord Arbiter Tyre, seeing the new threat, fell for it. His pride, already wounded by the broadcast, could not allow such a challenge to go unanswered. "All ships," he roared. "Retarget, destroy that signature, leave nothing." The massive crescent of warships began to pivot, a ponderous, graceful turn of immense firepower. They were turning their backs on the battered Task Force 11. They were turning their backs on the Swiftwing. "The window is open," Lyceum stated. The little corvette shot forward a silver needle against the black. It accelerated with a suicidal ferocity, a silent prayer aimed at the heart of the enemy's power. "Close the ledger. Balance the account." The Valburan command cruiser, the Word of Tyre, registered the threat too late. It began to bring its point defense cannons around, but the corvette was too fast, too close. It wasn't trying to fight only to deliver its message. The Swiftwing fired a single, precisely modulated energy pulse from its forward emitter. The beam was almost invisible, a whisper of coherent light that struck the gravitic projector at its base. For a moment, nothing happened. The corvette, its mission complete, tumbled past the massive cruiser, its momentum carrying it into the void. Then the universe screamed. The targeted emitter glowed a furious cherry red, then violet, then a color that had no name. A high-frequency vibration shook every ship in the system, a note of pure cosmic dissonance. The shimmering containment field flickered warped, and then collapsed inward with the force of a supernova. Their cage became their own funeral pyre. A wave of raw gravitational force and electromagnetic energy washed over the Valbaran fleet. The emitters designed to project power outward now had that power turned back upon them. They overloaded in a chain reaction, the feedback loop cascading through their network in microseconds. Alarms shrieked across the Valbaran command channels as their ships were slammed by the backlash of their own weapon. Shields collapsed. Weapon systems shorted out. Reactors went into emergency shutdown. The proud, invincible fleet of the Ascendancy was adrift, crippled not by human weapons, but by the catastrophic failure of their own device. The kill box had turned itself inside out. Task Force 11, positioned at the center, was rocked by the field's collapse, but shielded from the worst of the backlash. The gravitic molasses was gone. The helm officer cried out in relief. "Admiral, we are free, all systems responding. The human fleet was free." The Valbaran fleet was a collection of floating targets. Victory. Lyceum's voice cut through the triumphant cheers on the bridge. It was cold, logical, and utterly ruthless. "Admiral, the Valbaran fleet is disabled. Main power and shields are offline fleet-wide. Tactical projections indicate it will take them a minimum of 15 minutes to restart their reactors. We are undamaged enough to deliver a decisive blow. I calculate an 82% probability of achieving their total annihilation with minimal further risk to ourselves." Every eye on the bridge turned to Rostova. Commander Kaito stood straighter, his hand hovering over the fire control panel. Ben Carter's face was a mask of grim expectation. They had been caged, beaten, and sentenced to death. Now the roles were reversed. Justice demanded a response. Vengeance whispered its sweet, simple solution. This was the final test. She had proven their doctrine wrong. She had broken their trap. Now would she adopt their methods? Would she render judgment in fire and death? Rostova looked at the tactical display, at the helpless enemy ships scattered before her. She remembered the child's face from the broadcast. She remembered her own words, "This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by callers." Her path was clear. Her transformation was complete. It was not vengeance that had brought them this far, but a righteous, calculated decisiveness. "No Lyceum," she said. Her voice quiet but ringing with absolute authority. "We are not them. The lesson is not over. You do not heal a wound by inflicting another." She turned to the comms ensign. "Open a channel, all fleet broadcast, unencrypted. I want every ship in this system, human and Valbaran, to hear this." The ensign nodded, her hands shaking slightly. "Channel is open, Admiral." Rostova stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the crippled Valbaran flagship. "This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Human Federation Fleet. To the commanders and crews of the Ascendancy Fleet. Look at your ships. Look at your screens. Your weapon has been turned against you. Your doctrine has failed. Your unchallenged word has been answered." Her voice was calm, not triumphant, but heavy with the weight of consequence. Lord Arbiter Tyre offered us an ultimatum of submission or death. His belief in that binary choice was his critical flaw. I will now offer you a new choice, a choice he was incapable of conceiving. They offered a sword. She would offer a bridge. "You have two options," Rostova continued, her words echoing in the sudden profound silence of space. "Option 1. You can attempt to restart your reactors and your weapons. We will detect the power surges and we will dismantle your ships piece by piece, starting with your fire control systems. We will not kill you, but we will leave you weaponless and adrift. A record of your fleet's complete and utter failure will be the only thing that returns to your home." She let that sink in. The threat was not of death, but of shame. The ultimate punishment for a culture built on pride. "Option 2, she said, her voice softening slightly. "You can accept that your doctrine is broken. Power down your weapon systems completely. Eject your primary fire control modules as a sign of good faith. Acknowledge our terms. In return, we will render medical aid, assist with your reactor restarts, and escort you to a neutral starbase. We will offer you a truce." She looked at the timer on her own screen. It had been her enemy just hours ago. Now it was her tool. "You have 60 seconds to decide. The choice is yours." Rostova out. A reckoning of wills counted in seconds. On the bridge of the word of Tier Lord Arbiter, Tyre was screaming. "Treachery, do not listen to her lies, restart the reactor's fire at will." But his voice was lost in a sea of confusion and doubt. His commanders were looking at each other, at their dead consoles, at the calm, undamaged human fleet, holding a sword of Damocles over their heads. They had seen their perfect doctrine fail. They had seen their invincible leader outmaneuvered, and they had all seen the broadcast. They had heard the child's voice. 30 seconds passed. The silence was absolute. Then, on the tactical display, a single Valbaran cruiser blinked. Its weapon signature vanished. It had powered down. A moment later, another followed. Then 3 more. A cascade of surrender began to ripple through the crippled fleet, a quiet rebellion of pragmatism and shame. Tyre watched his face ashen as his fleet chose peace over his pride. His authority, his unchallenged word, evaporated before his eyes. Their empire was built on a voice. Now it was silent. The last ship to power down was Tyr's own flagship. He was countermanded by his own second-in-command, a quiet final act of mutiny that saved the lives of his crew. The war for today was over. Rostova had not just won a battle, she had broken the philosophy that fueled it. A priority message blinked on Rostova's console. It was from the Interstellar Concordance. "Admiral, we have monitored the situation. Your data broadcast has been authenticated. In light of the Valbaran Ascendancy's unprovoked aggression and use of civilian hostages, an emergency session has been called. The legality of their ultimatum doctrine is officially under review. A public ledger has been opened with this engagement as the first entry. Their expansion privileges have been rescinded effective immediately. The cost of their aggression was now a permanent public record." Rostova let out a long, slow breath. The tension on the bridge finally broke. Cries of relief and exhausted cheers filled the air. She looked at her crew, their faces smudged with soot, their eyes weary but shining with pride. They had held the line. They had taught the lesson. The heat shimmer from the Vindicator's overworked heat sinks finally began to dissipate, the air losing its metallic tang. On the main screen, the lights of the Valbaran fleet, now powered only by essential life support, dimmed to a cold, neutral pewter. The tally on the new interstellar public ledger clicked over its crisp digital numbers, formally confirming the censure against the Ascendancy. "An ultimatum is a declaration that you have stopped listening. It is the end of a conversation. But the universe is a dialogue endless and complex. True strength is not the power to shout the last word, but the wisdom to keep the conversation going, to offer a different path." They built their faith on a single unchallengeable word. We showed them that the most powerful words of all are a choice, a reckoning, and a chance to begin anew. The ledger is balanced.